What's up, geeks and gamers? It's Odin coming back with a box office breakdown for this past weekend, which saw The Nun 2 in its second weekend once again come out on top against the brand new film featuring the Poirot character by the likes of Kenneth Branagh in A Haunting in Venice, with the previous film, Nun 2, getting 14.7 to The Haunting in Venice's 14.5. And so very interesting to see what is going on with this race right now. These are just the estimates, and so we could see when the Monday and Tuesday adjustments happen, we could ultimately end up seeing The Nun 2 losing to Poirot. Either way, though, it is again, I guess you could argue a decent start for The Haunting in Venice. The problem, though, of course, is that the film still costs a little bit too much for that kind of opening, especially when you take into account all of the other factors for this film. So we'll talk about a little bit about The Nun 2 and also a little bit about the numbers here for A Haunting in Venice, because Nun 2 is already made profit, is already going to continue to add to those profits that it already was starting to make earlier this week. We also have, of course, some news with Oppenheimer crossing the $900 million mark officially. And the question, of course, is how much money will this film ultimately make? Some suspect that maybe it'll have enough gas in the tank to push it all the way to $1 billion. I don't think it honestly will. I know that there's speculation over whether it's going to get a release in other foreign countries that has not had a release in yet. Again, I just have some doubts about that, but we'll have to, of course, wait and see what actually happens. So let's go ahead and go into the actual numbers themselves. So The Nun 2, as you can see right here, dropped 55% from last weekend, so not one of the best drops in the world, but because this film costs so little in comparison to many other films, including Haunting in Venice, what we're seeing from The Nun 2 is very, very impressive. A $56.5 million domestic total at this point in time, and again, coming in that number one spot against the brand new film from 20th Century Studios, a Disney property in this case, of A Haunting in Venice's 14.5. And so, of course, we'll be looking at this battle once the actual numbers start to adjust, but still, interesting nonetheless that A Haunting in Venice does not seem like it's going to have the gas that it needs to have as impressive an opening as The Nun 2 had, for instance. So it's interesting because if you look at the marketing campaign for The Haunting in Venice, right, even though we know it's based off of the Agatha Christie novel, we know that they've taken liberties with the story as they tend to do, but we also recognize that from the marketing, they were marketing the movie as a horror film. I remember that I, very much liked the first movie. I thought Murder on the Orient Express and the adaptation was for the most part entertaining, and surprisingly so. Whereas the second film, with Death on the Nile, just wasn't nearly as good, and the ending, to me, just completely destroyed any goodwill that you could really have towards the film. So I really had no high hopes for this. Now, some people that I trust have seen it and said that they actually enjoyed it, but for me, I think that where they, tried to make something a little bit different, where they tried to market it towards an audience that just, again, has been showing up in a lot higher droves, is that horror film audience, right? That's what you saw with The Nun 2, and that's what you've seen with a lot of other horror films that have come out just this year, right? Is these lower budgeted movies able to make their money back and make a decent amount of profit in addition to that because of, again, that market and because of that audience showing up for it, whereas the typical audience for an Agatha Christie novelization, or for, in this case, an adaptation from the novel, you ultimately end up seeing that older demographic is just not really showing up to these movies in any consistent way, right? We've seen some exceptions with Oppenheimer, which drove out many different types of audiences, right? Different demographics all around. This movie, though, much more towards that older demographic, not showing up in the same way. And I think that what cost them any of the older demographic was probably the fact that they did market it as that horror film. It obviously was not enough to appeal to those younger audiences, and clearly it was enough to scare off at least some people when it came to the older demographics, but I don't think that they would have showed up anyway if they had just, marketed this film in a different way. But again, that's just my own personal take on that. Coming to the number 3 spot is The Equalizer 3, 40% hold there after the third week of release. And so again, a decent hold there in a third week release there, and to $73.6 million total domestic right now. And these numbers, again, are not the best in the world, but right now it looks like it is tracking to still probably be able to make at least what the other films in the franchise have made. Of course, when we talk about just the average ticket prices these days, we see that the audience for The Equalizer has indeed shrunk a little bit because of that. My Big Fat Greek Wedding has also dropped 53% in its second week of release, so not nearly as big of a drop as The Nun 2. However, its opening weekend was also not anywhere close to that of The Nun 2's. And so this film right now is at the point where it might have a chance of making its money back, maybe making a little bit of profit, but gone are the days of the first film where it had such a small budget, had such high return on investment, and then they again saw a complete fall off with the second film. I don't know what they were thinking for this movie, but hey, they might be able to justify their existence by making their money back, but we'll have to wait and see. And then still in the top 5, even after 9 weeks of release, now available on digital services, only dropping 30% once again, so very, very strong numbers here, is Barbie, coming in the number 5 spot, $3.9 million, still making multiple millions of dollars every single week, still also adding to its overall domestic total. Going into individual releases here, we got The Nun 2. Right now, worldwide, it's made $158.8 million. Again, I have no interest in this film, but apparently there are still a lot of big fans of the Conjuring universe, and some that are even fans of this, or at the very least have some interest in it. Anyone who's a horror fan, I can imagine, probably has at least some general interest in this movie. So right now, it's doing exactly what you would expect for a movie like this, having a lower budget, being able to make its money back, again, pretty easily. No budget being reported here on the numbers, but of course we do have some projections on our charting. Haunting in Venice at $37.2 million. Again, not really that strong of a start. This film likely cost around $60 million or so, which again is quite a bit of money to make back. And even though there is always that outside baseball's chance that you have a chance to make that money, right now, it's not looking too great for the actual film. Equalizer 3, as I mentioned, is still doing well enough after 3 weeks to have a chance of being able to maybe get into the heights of the total box office of the other 2 films of the franchise. But because of those average ticket sales, is still not going to be anywhere close to as far as just numbers of people going to see those first 2 films in the release schedule. So going now into the actual box office itself, as you can see, The Haunting in Venice at $37.2 million. The reason why that's not all that impressive is because the budget for the film, being $60 million, means you're talking about a break even of roughly $150 million. Now again, that's using that 2.5 multiplier, so if you have a 3 times multiplier, oh boy, now that becomes $180 million that it needs to make. So somewhere between 150 and probably 200 to be on the safe side, this film needs to make to actually break even at a $37.2 million start. It's just not looking like that's going to happen. A lot of films in their first weekend, if you talk about their worldwide release, usually it's about a third of their entire overall box office. And if that holds out, if that's the typical average that we see for most films compared to their first weekend. So that means you're looking at the $90 to $120 million range potentially for this movie to end at this point. Yeah, I don't think that is going to be, that's not going to be a very good sign for that. In fact, we'll go ahead and update this chart in real time so that way y'all can kind of see. Right now it's at $67 million in the red at this point. Compared to everything else, it's at 0.6 times its budget. So again, 2.5 times the budget, sometimes 3 times the budget is going to be that break even. That is still a pretty far cry from that. We can, of course, now project that The Nun 2 likely going to make somewhere between $80 and $130 million. So very, very good numbers right now showing for that movie. Right now it's at $158 million worldwide. That, compared to its budget, puts it at around around $37.5 million as far as actual net gain profits are concerned. And again, this comes down to the fact that Warner Brothers only spent $38.5 million, right? So the actual production budget being almost half of what Haunting in Venice was is the reason why a film like this is able to make as much money as it is, and then also be able to make profits on top of that. So very, very impressive to see that number as it is going out. The projections right now for my Big Fat Greek Wedding 3 right now looking like it'll probably lose somewhere around $6 million, but has a chance of getting to $1.6 million. And again, that's using that 2.5 number. And this is right now using an estimated budget of around $18 million as of the last time that I checked, which was I think yesterday I was able to double check to see if they had yet a budget for this movie. There was nothing yet showing for it, and we'll go ahead and actually do this live because we like doing things live here on Geeks and Gamers. So let's see if they've actually updated the budget here. Because usually if there's a budget update, someone in this community ultimately adds it in there. And nope, so far there has not been anything added. So right now, the early indications are that it's probably costing around $18 million. So if that is the case, not looking good for the film. If it costs a lot less than $18 million, okay, then you might have something to work with. One of the big things that's kind of working against this film is that they did shoot on location in Greece. So that probably is going to have raised that actual budget. So, the $5 million that was spent on the first movie, probably we could say, a lot more was spent on this one because of the on-location shooting, especially in somewhere like Greece. Equalizer 3, as we talked about before, $132.3 million. I mean, right now it's only $25 million in the red. So basically, there is still a chance for the film to make its money back and maybe make a little bit of profit. Obviously, you don't always want to hear that with a movie. In fact, you never want to hear that. You always want to hear, okay, we're making some profits already in theaters, and now we can just add to those profits in the long run. And I think that ultimately is something that they're going to hope to see. Right now, though, with the way it's tracking, it's not looking like it's going to be able to reach the heights. The other two films of the franchise got close to that $190 to $200 million range. The earlier, last week, we were able to make some projections, and based on how it's tracking right now, it's likely to get somewhere between 150 and 215. So it's looking like it's definitely going to go well past the $150 million mark. The question is, does it get close to that max projection of 215? And excels the other films in the franchise, or, and this is where it probably is going to be more likely as this is the average, is it going to fall instead around 184, 180-ish million, and that would put it again right about where the other films have made. But when you take into account the ticket prices changing, it still means less tickets overall. So those are the numbers as they currently stand with those films. One thing I wanted to update here is for Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning Part 1, there was an article that came out the other day talking about how they had basically gotten a $75 million reward in a settlement case with an insurance company because of COVID, which means that the money that they should have gotten because of the fact that they took out insurance for in case of delays and things like that, the insurance company apparently did not want to pay because of the, again, gross oversimplification. Apparently they didn't want to pay because of, COVID and because of being unknown, but that's kind of the point of buying insurance, right? So it looks like they're going to get about $75 million from that. So still won't be enough for it to be able to make its money back, but that is going to make it look a lot better on there, right? So that would mean you're looking around a $20 million loss, again, give or take. I would have to actually, plug this into the actual chart itself, and I probably will update that as we get closer to, the end of this film's release. But let's just say it's a very good sign for them because they'll definitely make that kind of money back on Blu-ray and 4K sales and also on any post-theatrical releases too, because even though it'll be on Paramount Plus here in the States and in other major countries, there will be several countries that do not have Paramount Plus that they'll be able to sell those streaming rights to. So just a little bit of an update on that film, but those are the movies as they stand. What are y'all's thoughts? Do you think that A Haunting in Venice is going to be able to make its money back? It's not really looking like it. Also, have you seen The Nun 2? Doing pretty impressive stuff here as far as its comparison to the other films currently out right now. So let me know your thoughts about that and anything else I mentioned in the comment section down below. Also, I might be out for a couple weeks because my baby girl is going to be here this coming Friday, and so I will definitely not be available to do the box office breakdown next Sunday. I can say that right now for a fact. But anything after that, it's going to be up in the air because of course, newborn and having a toddler also already. Things are going to get a little bit crazy here in Asgard. So just so you know that if you don't see me on the Sunday box office for a couple days, or rather for a couple weeks, that is ultimately going to be why, and I will try to keep y'all posted on that. And you can follow me on a news site actually, and I'll talk about that actually more specific in my own channel's video on OMB reviews. But check me out over on Cricketless, and I'll go more detail about that site in my box office breakdown over on OME Reviews. But anyway, let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below. If you like this video, smash that like button. A lot of the fun I see. Wherever it is that you're watching, smash it. Wherever it is that we are. Again, we're everywhere these days, it seems. Whatever it is, smash it. You guys are all amazing and beautiful. Hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. A blessed Sunday. See you in a few weeks. And as always, God bless.